Welcome to another episode of GTM Innovators by 360 Insights. I'm your host, Kyle James, and today we're diving into all sorts of AI stuff from a product management perspective with my guest, Tim Macchi. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Kyle. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So Tim is currently the growth product manager at TeamGantt, where he's been for, gosh, Tim, you've been there almost a decade now before spending time at Dynatrace, Smart Bear, and HubSpot, among other places. And you and I have known each other forever from our time back at HubSpot, gosh, almost 15 years ago now.
Time flies.
It does. We're getting old, buddy. Um, and you're a huge tinker. You built some small e-commerce businesses on the side, and you're doing a whole bunch of building of AI agents right now that I personally find super fascinating, and I can't wait to kind of dive into some of the stuff you're playing there and learning and figuring out. Um, Tim, welcome to the show. Any more of your background that you want to fill in that I might have missed, or you want to kind of tell the audience here?
No, I think you did a good job. Yeah, it kind of covers the whole gamut, the whole span. So
Awesome. Awesome. So I know, I'll just go ahead and start here. Something that you and I have been talking about on the side is kind of some of the stuff that you're doing from kind of the growth product manager side about how you're thinking about tying AI into some of your work. And you were telling me how you're doing using kind of AI agents and stuff to like do QA testing now.
yeah.
That's fascinating. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so it's not really being used yet because it was really just tinkering around with the new um OpenAI operator, just trying to think of, things that it could do right now, and really really came up with the idea because I didn't want to be putting any of my passwords into it just yet. So I was like, what else can I do with this right now to just see how well it works? And one of the ideas I had is, you know, as a product manager that's focused on growth and data, onboarding is a major focus. So I was like, all right, well, let's see what this thing can do if we have it go through TeamGantt's onboarding. And I kind of already knew some of the things that needed to be tweaked and needed to be fixed, but I wanted to see what the AI said. So I just kind of gave it the instructions to go to TeamGantt, sign up for a new account, sign up for putting my own passwords in, and then go through the onboarding and go through it as a user, and report back on the user experience and any areas that seem like they might need some improvement. And yeah, I was blown away for like a early release product. It really is still early release. There's a lot of things that I think that are going to improve with it, but it pretty much nailed it, man. Like it hit all the points on the onboarding that we've been talking about that we want to fix. So that was pretty impressive.
So let's go. Let's double click on this, right? Because what we've heard a lot of people say in the AI space is we've hit a place where what is the right word I'm looking for? Like artificial, we can start generating artificial data, or what's the word? Not artificial, but
Synthetic.
secondhand data for that the engines are now putting out for
Yeah,
themselves to
this
kind of
synthetic data, maybe.
synthetic data. There you
Yeah.
go. Like so, basically, what you're talking about is you're doing instead of paying for, um, you know, to watch people try to QA and user test your product, you're able to use AI to like generate that synthetic data for you. Is that kind of a good way to think about this?
Yeah. I think, it's definitely a proxy. Um,
Yeah.
in general, like I think a good kind of general rule that I've found is that AI seems to be really good at kind of emulating market research data, customer data, feedback data. So, like another area that I've been exploring using AI for is kind of just synthesizing market research data.
Do
So,
tell.
one of the big, obviously, a lot of people might be familiar with jobs to be done, and there's a flavor of jobs to be done called outcome driven innovation, or ODI. And
Hmm.
even the ODI people have been playing around with this because what they're finding is there's steps in the ODI process where you have to kind of do a lot of phone calls, do a lot of interviews, and find out, drill down and find out what the unmet needs of users are. And the whole point of that process is to de-risk innovation, right? So make sure you're
Hmm.
not putting your ladder on the wrong wall, you're not building the wrong thing. And it's a really awesome process. I think the ODI version of jobs to be done in particular is like really fascinating, but it's very intense. It's very involved. There's a lot of steps. It's very expensive to do. So it's really interesting to see how it's evolving and how good AI is at acting as a proxy for some of that. So if you wanted to do a lightweight version of it, obviously if you want to do like the best version of it, hire the ODI guys, or take the course, learn how to do it yourself. But if you're looking just for some useful version of that AI can do a lot of the steps really well. So you know doing the initial kind of collection of what the unmet needs might be of a particular persona.
Yeah.
I've found like having done both the full process and then seeing how like what AI comes up with, it's mind blowing how close it can get.
Well, I'm sure, right? Because personas are like fictitious versions of a synthetic real person anyway, right? Like
Right.
it's the soccer mom that likes to do these activities, which is kind of an artificial creation anyway. So it makes sense that they'd be able to kind of like lump that bucket together in that cohort. Well,
Yeah.
so if I'm pros and conning this out, right? Like the pro is obviously super fast iterations. Um, cheap, you mentioned that kind of like because you could do this fast and keep the cost down. But like the fear that I just comes to my where my my antennas are kind of going off, my spider sense
Mm.
is like, do you worry that we're not getting some of the authenticity of it, right? Like because it's replicating a human, and I know I just basically probed that already, but like because you're not actually getting some of that, are you missing some of those maybe stereotypes or devil in the details that we might not find out because we're kind of like
Yeah.
pulling that?
Yeah, it's a good point. Like I don't see, and maybe this will change in the future. I'm not as super convinced that it will, but like that AI is going to completely replace the human aspect of things.
Yeah,
And I think it's important to realize the shortfall of the technology and use it in the right way. So like one of the things that I kind of preach is AI shouldn't be used as a replacement for your process. It should be used to augment your process. And that's when you get the best results. So whether you're like trying to like create blog posts or whatever you're trying to do, rather than looking to have AI do a one-shot replacement for you and then you can just go like go do something, go to the beach or something.
hmm
um, it's just really not there yet, and I think a lot of people can get into trouble if they're or they're just their results are not going to be great if they're looking to use AI that way. But if you use AI, and this goes for the tool builders too, like I'm seeing a lot of AI tools be built, and everyone's kind of going for that one button click generation. Like we've all seen those tools where it's like build a website, just give us a brief prompt and we'll build it for you, right? I think
yeah,
people ultimately it's like kind of we're kind of in the gimmicky phase of the technology still. And I think the people that are going to win, an example that I like to use is like Reloom. They're a technology for helping you build websites with AI. And the approach they take, I think, is a much better approach where the human is really in the loop the whole time.
hmm
And the way they do it is rather than taking the one click generation approach, they break down the human workflow. Like, what does a good website designer do? What are all the steps that they take to build a good website?
yeah,
And they take you through each of those steps, and AI augments every step of the way. So the first thing you do is it helps you generate a sitemap. So you put in a prompt for the website you want to build. It helps you build a sitemap. You then talk with it, modify it, to improve it if it's not what you want. And then the next step is it builds out the pages on the on the sitemap into wireframes, and then you go
yeah.
through that and you augment the wireframes, the copy and all that stuff. So it's kind of taking you through the workflow process, and the AI is kind of augmenting you as you go. And I think those are the workflows and the tools that are going to win out after kind of like the hype cycle and the kind of the novelty phase
Interesting.
wears off.
So let me pick like what I think I heard you said, and you tell me if this is kind of accurate or not, is you really have to be, you have to know what you want when you're kind of going in and using these tools. And you have to be very explicit and detailed in that entire prompt to get a good result. Is that kind of like a good way to think about that?
Yeah, I think right now that's where we're at. Like,
Yeah.
it, I will say though, the other thing that I like about AI is you don't necessarily have to come into it with that domain expertise, but you have
Okay.
to at least be curious and want to learn it first before you try. And AI is really good at that as well. So sometimes for things that, like for instance, I've built multiple applications, like mobile applications, web applications with AI. I came into it not knowing anything about those spaces, but one of the first things I did is I spent a lot of time with with Chat GPT, with Claude, just asking it questions, trying to
Hmm.
figure out like get my bearings so I understood like how these things work before I started trying to work with it to build those things. So you can still kind of like do things that you might not have domain expertise. If you have domain expertise, you can jump right into these tools and have them augment your workflow and get, you know, double, triple, quadruple your productivity. But if there's a new area that you've interested in, you've always been itching to try to like learn more about, AI can really help you there too. And then, get you to that next step of once you know a little bit more, you can use AI to help you through that.
So let's like try to give example of that because like what I'm hearing you say is like from a go-to-market perspective, if you're trying to like do the initial research on stuff, this is super powerful because you could say, hey, or who are the buyers of this kind of product? Play the pros and cons or devil's advocate out if this is a good go-to-market product. What's the TAM? What is the pivot? Like
Yeah.
you could iterate through all that like in hours instead of months, years. Is that kind of
Yeah. Yeah. I think you can. And you just gotta decide how critical the fidelity of the data is, right? So
uh-huh.
um if you really need to ensure that the fidelity data is good, you'd want to back up those findings with some actual like feet on the ground market research. But you can get really far and get pretty good fidelity right now with AI.
It's interesting. And I think that yeah, I think a lot we just probably need to spend more time like doing that research and it does I've noticed you could easily like put a finger on a best guess or like show me your math process about how you came up with this estimate, right? Whether it's, we're on a podcast now, it's like, all right, what is a good podcast total audience? Like how fast can you expect to grow things? What are the different ways to measure analytics and stuff? I mean, that's just some of the stuff I've been playing around with recently, but it really is good for doing maybe that research that is not your standard stuff.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely think so. I think that if if people are kind of not really haven't integrated AI into their workflow yet, I would just encourage them to experiment with different models because they're all good at different things, right? Like
Yeah.
certain ones are better at, providing references and, there's different strengths and weaknesses that each one has. And the only way I mean, you can look it up, but I think it also helps to just play around with them and see what the output is like. Um, there's a lot of tools out there. You don't necessarily have to sign up for all the different platforms. There's a lot of tools out there that allow you to kind of experiment with different ones. So there's some tools that allow you to chat with a lot of different models and kind
Hmm.
of just compare the output. Um, I mean, Agent AI is one of those. They definitely allow you to do that. So yeah, I would just encourage people to like get out there, experiment with the different models for whatever they're trying to do, and kind of figure out which ones are better for writing blog posts or which ones are better for doing market research for go to market research, so they can really start to understand, kind of get those tools in their tool belt.
Well, all right, let's double click into that because I think that's interesting. I think a lot of people are probably at that barrier, right? Like, because you have Claude out there and you've got Perplexity and you've got Chat GPT and you've got Gemini, and that's just four, right? Like, how are you making your decision about what to do with each platform?
Yeah,
Right? And like, what are some of the things that you're doing, at TeamGantt in your roles, kind of with these, and like how do you draw the line, right? Like, or do you kind of use a little bit of all of them, or do you have special preferences, or do you think some are better at some things and not? Like
yeah,
explore. What is your thought process there, and how are you breaking that out?
yeah. So I think it's just constantly experimenting. So I personally I spend a lot of my own personal budget on AI tools. I think my AI, I think that my monthly spend on AI right now is like probably over $400 a month.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I mean, I use one of the ones that I'm using the most right now is GPT Pro because the deep research is just awesome. Like it's really good. And the reason it's really good, especially for stuff like market research, is that it combines searching with chain of thought. And
Okay.
so it's able to search through multiple sources, um, and then do chain of thought reasoning, which basically is just kind of like the LLM kind of just checking its own work and making sure that it's achieving the goal that you gave it. You have to wait a little bit longer, but I just like when when I need something for work or even just in my personal life, I'm a pretty curious person, so I'll just give it to the deep research and then go on with my work and then come back to it a few minutes later to check. Um, yeah, so like I think that Claude is the best for code still, surprisingly. Like Sonnet uh, is still the best, and, and it's kind of crazy because they haven't really updated it.
And you have like no experience or background coding, right? And you're using this thing to like build applications and code for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I was probably like me and you are probably on similar level. Like I can read and understand CSS, HTML, and JavaScript, but
Yeah.
you give me a blank page, and I can't start
Write a
building an
function, no
application
clue.
from
Yeah.
a blank page. But yeah, so I'm able to pretty much build anything. I've tried like any ideas that come to my head, and I've tried all the different tools. Right now, I prefer Cursor for coding, but if you're not super experienced, there's tools like Lovable, and this is great too in terms of go to market, right? So like one of the big things that's still big with obviously SEO is changing. Everyone's talking about you know LLM optimization instead of SEO optimization, and
Hmm.
it's kind of like we're a little bit in the fog of war right now with it. I think people have ideas, but they're not super flushed out. But one of the things that still seems to be working pretty well is the old HubSpot trick of marketing grader, like building these kind of micro apps as marketing vehicles, right? So this is kind of important, even if you're like a marketer or somebody that's trying to go to market. Maybe you have a developer, but they're really focused on your core product. You can build these types. I mean, this is it can you can really build complex products with AI and coding,
Hmm.
but these kind of simple micro marketing apps are
Like
really,
calculators and little
yeah.
apps that feel a little, yeah.
You can output one of those in a couple hours, and if you don't want to use Cursor, because Cursor is a little bit more like you got to know a little bit about what you're doing. You got to know a little bit, and I've only gotten there just because I've been the more you use it, the more you kind of it's almost like just through osmosis, like
Yeah.
become a little bit of a developer. But there's tools like Lovable and Bolt.new and what's the other one? I can't remember it right now. Replit, the Replit agent
Okay.
that are really good for people that don't really know anything about code. They just know what they want to build, and they can just type in a prompt, and it brings them through kind of the process, and then they can iterate from there. So that's another, I think, area where AI can really help with, specifically with like marketing and go to market.
So so that's super interesting, right? Like from a product marketer, product management perspective too, right? Like instead of writing like a traditional product requirements doc, you're almost able to like prototype up for an engineer some of the stuff that maybe you want them to like really flesh out and stand up architecture for build. Like
Yeah,
it seems like what you're saying is like, and so my product is like spinning too. Like this is how you turbocharge and empower product people to go to new
yeah,
levels, just for some of these things that we couldn't do before because we weren't full-time engineers.
yeah. I've started actually submitting code to TeamGantt,
Oh
um,
wow.
like in the last couple of weeks because our developers are like any other company, right? It's like I don't know if you've noticed this, but you might hire a developer to just focus on marketing, right? Or you might
Hmm.
hire a developer to just focus on growth or onboarding. But inevitably, what happens is they end up getting cannibalized because there's just always a hunger for more engineers in the core
Yes.
product, right? So one of the things I've started doing is just, you know, I asked and I did some pairing with our developer to understand our process and make sure that, as I'm building things in the app, that I'm doing them with the right process. And that's super important. But the things that are now accessible to a product manager that's somewhat technical, right, is you can update your onboarding. You don't have to ask for a developer to help. And that, so like the areas that I'm focused on right now in terms of submitting code
Yeah.
are the areas that I'm responsible for from a product management point of view. So like growth, which includes like onboarding
Okay.
and integrations. So one of the things I did was, integrations are very hard. I think, any company that has to build integrations for their app and has tried to do it will attest to the pain. And it's also something that from a developer's point of view is somewhat like you have to learn some of these new platforms that
Hmm.
that might it's not necessarily like a transferable skill, right? So like you work on this, you might have to learn like something for Jira that you're not going to really use again, other than just to maintain and update that integration. So just through AI and like kind of asking it questions, I found these platforms. One of them is Nango.dev that makes it really easy to build integrations. And, you know, as a product manager, I can do most of the work,
Oh,
and then
wow.
all we really need is, a little bit of front end help to help connect the front end. And now we can, 5x our integration output. So yeah, you're
Wow.
totally right. Like
So it's
it's
doing a lot of that solution architecting and field mapping and stuff for you in a way that it's just handing off the engineer to like, all right, build your
yeah,
webhooks.
yeah. And it kind of fills that gap. The gap between product manager and engineering sometimes is like we don't know how hard this is to build, you know?
Hmm.
And so you can get a lot more intelligent about, your specs and what you're kind of putting on the developer's plate by understanding a little bit more about what's happening under the hood and what it takes to get kind of some of that work done. So I think honestly, like that's the future of product management personally. Like I know there's a couple other product thought leaders on LinkedIn that have had a similar hot take, and I'm totally in agreement that with AI, there's going to be a little bit more of a blending of the edges
Hmm.
in the product management role, and you're going to be. I think it's not going to happen tomorrow, but I think you are going to be expected to know a little more technically, or be a little more technically capable.
Yeah, it's probably not even coding. I mean, you can have the tools code for you, but is understand what you want to get coded and why. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes a bunch of sense. What else? What else are you, what else, how else are you kind of like optimizing and like bringing in stuff to optimizing, you're bringing this AI co-pilot for product role, like besides, I mean, clearly we've talked about research, we've talked about prototyping, we've talked about what about analytics? How are you, like, we've talked a lot about the qualitative,
Hmm.
well, I guess, yeah, qualitative. What about the quantitative, the numbers and data stuff? Are you using any of that to think about how you aggregate up whatever you're measuring or what you're able to pull, and look for new insights that maybe you might not think for directly?
Yeah. So that's like an area that I'm trying to focus more on right now. Really, in my job, we've really used Amplitude for analytics.
Okay.
But now with AI, it opens up. I know a little bit of SQL, um, but it opens up even for a smaller company like TeamGantt. We're small in terms of employees, right? It opens up like the ability for a product manager to be a data scientist. So one of the things that we're trying to do right now is, spin up a metabase or spin up some sort of access um, to our database, so we can start doing some data pipeline analysis and some deeper analysis of things that can be hard to do right now when you have all these data silos. So not an area that I have done a ton of work on, but it's an area that we're kind of looking at right now. I think like one area that I've thought a lot about in terms of product um, is I think a lot of things are broken right now, specifically with how we deal with gather user feedback.
Oh, do
Um,
tell. Let's go.
yeah. So like the current so there's a lot of problems, right? So like the current landscape is you don't really gather much data on people in terms of like qualitative data. And by the way, with AI, it's a lot easier to turn qualitative data into quantitative data.
Yes.
It's really good at that. But we're only really getting data on users after they like come into the application for the most part, right? And then they might use the tool, and we try to do things like put a feedback button or put a feedback link somewhere in the app, and they click that, and maybe they'll get to a like a canny or something like that, and submit their feedback or be asked to like search for their feedback to see if it already exists and then upvote it. And like we're asking the user to do a lot of work,
Yeah.
and the quality of the data that we're getting is not as good as it could be. And it puts a lot of work on us too. So we're asking the user to do a lot of work, and then we're asking the product managers to do a lot of work in terms of like merging that feedback, kind of reviewing it, doing all that stuff. That can be a lot of work.
A lot of work
Um,
and it's all manual. Yeah.
yeah,
It takes a lot of time.
takes a lot of time. And then inevitably you're still left with questions, right? So like I think one of the things that we're going to see is AI is going to do a lot better job of gathering that data, um, normalizing it, and doing it in a way that's easier for the user, um, and easier for the product manager. So a lot of the detail digging can be done by the AI to get to the root of what the user really wants, and then the merging can be done by the AI, and then really all you need is the product manager to go in and spot check and kind of run an analysis on what people are looking for when they're looking to build a new product, and then reach out to those users that all kind of had similar cohorts. But I don't think like I think the whole model of like having this public website where you have all your feature requests open for all your competitors to see, and you're asking users to upvote, it was a cool trend, but I think that's going to go away. Um and I'm actually like in my free time working on building something that I want to use for TeamGantt, so I'm working on something that
Why do you think it's going away? Because you're sharing that competitive intelligence
a
or
lot of reasons. I think
showing
it's just
your dirty laundry and warts to your competition?
I think it was the best way to do things before AI, but it's one of those things that like I think has to be completely rethought in the age of AI, because of those reasons. Because I think it requires a lot of work on the user. We're not getting as much feedback as we could get. It's
Yeah.
not as good as we could get, and it's a lot of work on the user and a lot of work on the PM to gain insight from it. And then I think the icing on the cake is that like, yeah, you are kind of just exposing everything to your competitors. Like if I wanted to compete with a product today, one of the first things I would do would be go to their canny board or go to their their product feedback board and see like what are the highest requests for users that they just haven't gotten to in a really long time.
Yeah.
Um,
And then
so
solve that, build a solution that solves that for cheap.
yeah, yeah. So I think like that's a huge innovation. The other part of that is we're not we're not really gathering data on users that might not make it to our product. So everyone's got if you have a product company, if you have a software product company, you have a website, you have people coming to the website. Some of those people might sign up for a trial or sign up for an account, whatever it is, right? But you
Hmm.
have probably a much larger share, usually, of people that just don't do that, right? And so I think AI is going to be used in a similar way to find out what are those people looking for and why aren't we fulfilling what they need. So I think it's about kind of like conversational feedback is going to be the as a general trend across all these things that we've discussed. For product and for marketing, conversational feedback I think is going to be huge, and I don't see anyone doing it yet, but I think there's going to be people doing it soon, and maybe there are, I just haven't found them.
Well,
um
and let's be honest, like that is something AI is already really good at, right?
Super
Like
good at it.
pull
Yeah.
transcripts, summarize, give me feedback, tell me the action points, and you can go listen to hundreds of sales calls you might have had in the last week or month and like, what are the trends? What are the things that people are complaining about a lot? Let's fix those.
Yep.
That's really easy to do now. As
Yeah.
long as you have the pipes and the infrastructure set up to collect all that and you're recording all of that, it's not hard.
Yep. Yeah, like another perfect dovetail off of that, Kyle, is like I think you have all of this really valuable data locked up in these conversations that salespeople are having with your customers, that support people are having with your customers, right? What if you could aggregate all of those transcripts and use it to generate social posts, use it to generate blog
Mhm.
posts for your brand? I mean, that's all possible now. And I think like one of the huge general trend that I hear a lot of people saying, and it's totally true, is like we just haven't caught up to what AI is capable of. We don't need AGI. Like we're still trying to wrap our heads around like what's possible now.
Yeah.
With where AI currently is today. And I mean, obviously it's accelerating every day.
So what do you do with that? Because I guess I've heard kind of a couple different schools of thought, right? Like one, it's gonna leap forward again. And so maybe it doesn't make sense to fully commit where it is now. Or two, more of like we need to get our infrastructure in place to be collecting all this data and synthesizing it because the outputs and things that we can do in the future are only going to be better the more data that we've collected. Like, how are you thinking about that, and what are you doing on kind of that respect?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like there's two camps of people, right? There's the people that are like, and I've heard this
And
as
there's a whole
well.
other camp that like we don't want anything to do with it. We're trying to keep our distance, and
Mhm.
that seems like a death sentence long term. But I get
Yeah.
why they're like that.
Yeah, it's just like every innovation curve, right? Like you have your early adopters, your early majority, your laggards, right? And I think it's no different here. I think there is a little bit different of an element here that we haven't really seen with other innovations, though, where you have a group of people that they might normally be people that would be willing to try new things, and you tapped into this, but they're like, well, everything's moving so fast. I don't want to dive in until like it settles, because like if I start learning now, then and I can't keep up with it. And in a week that'll be more advanced, and what I'm doing now will be kind of obsolete. And I don't think that that's the right approach personally. I think that the best thing you can be doing right now is just diving in and learning as much as you can about AI as it stands today and how it can help you in whatever you're doing, whatever your role is, because there is some, regardless of what your role is or what you're doing or what your seniority level is, there is something that it can accelerate your workflow, it can accelerate your productivity. And so I would say, why not? Right? Like if there's
Yeah,
benefit in it now, why not? And it will also help you kind of innately stay up to date with the innovation if you're in it. You know what I mean? Like if you're waiting, first of all, I don't think it's going to slow down anytime soon.
yeah. Just
But if
more and
you're
more
waiting, I
compute
think you're
getting
going to
thrown
kind of,
at it.
yeah, I think you're going to kind of get left behind, honestly. I think obviously there's a huge discussion about AI is going to replace a lot of people's jobs, and I think it will shrink, you know, it will shrink the job pool for some roles. But for the foreseeable future, I think the people that are going to be winning those jobs are the people that are the most skilled with the AI tools that they have.
Yeah,
Simply because they're going to be more productive. So if you have exponentially more productivity coming out of a role, you just don't need as many of those people in the role.
yeah.
Um, and that's a whole nother discussion. I just think like it's unfortunate. There's other opportunities for people, um, but
Well, if we just look at
innovation.
history, I kind of look at history and think, what happened in the Industrial Revolution? Everybody started working in factories, and we saw all these farming jobs go away. They were replacing factories. What happened in the Mad Men age when, they had every single person in a company had a secretary those days, right? Then we got tools and automation, and half those jobs went away. And we found other more productive, valuable things for people to do. And you just have to feel like that will happen again. It might take some time to work out, but like that has to come.
Yeah.
Who knows what form that'll be, and maybe that'll be a lot more artisan, creative, custom things where sure you can have AI do something cookie cutter, but if you want something really pristine, you know, nice, you still have human artisans come and do it, and they could put more time into it in ways they wouldn't. I don't know, like, but I
Yeah, I
feel
mean, a
like,
lot of a lot of barriers are lower, right?
yeah,
So, like the average person now can do things that they couldn't have done before without a lot of education or time. So I think that's going to just continue to accelerate. So, like a good example, I keep focusing on it because it's like what I'm thinking about a lot is like building applications or AI agents, right? So it used to be the case, right, that you would have to raise money, you would have to have a lot of experience, you'd either have to be a developer or recruit a developer. But all of that now is like, I think what's going to happen is that's still going to be the case. There's still going to be venture money for, you know, for software and for technology, but it's going to go up the ladder in terms of its technical, it's how technical it is, how difficult it is to execute. It's going to open doors for us to do things that are more difficult, and that's where that money is going to go. But for the
Yeah.
rest of the tools that were previously, in that category, they're becoming open to everybody. So I think we're going to see kind of this like revolution of bespoke software happen, where these niches are going to open up that maybe weren't economical. It just didn't make sense for someone to go out and try to raise money for it because the total addressable market wasn't big enough, or like all these other things. And like now all that math has changed. And so what my point is that like there's opportunities that are shrinking, but there's new opportunities that are opening as well. And so that's another reason to be kind of, paying attention and to be learning about this stuff, is like you're able to spot a lot of these things a lot sooner and maybe end up doing something that's more aligned with your passions, and empowered by AI than you would have done otherwise. So I'm not like a negative person when it comes to AI. I think I'm like everyone else, where I'm like, there's kind of a certain percentage that's like super excited and energized by it. There's also a portion that's also a little bit scared. I think that's normal, but on the whole, I'm more on like the energized and excited part.
Yeah. Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Like, there's definitely some scary stuff that could come, but it's you got to look at the half glass full, half empty, and like weigh it out.
Yep.
Well, I want to be mindful of your time, but I do want to ask you kind of one final question in closing because you kind of teased on it. Like, how do you see AI changing product in the future? Like, how do you see this evolving, and like, what do future products
Yeah.
do? Like, I don't know, open ended, run with it. What
Yeah.
are you thinking about there?
I think we're going to see less people running their head into the walls, building things that nobody wants. I think that we're going to see more people building useful things for people, and I think we're going to see more useful products in niches that previously, like I said, might not have been made economic sense to go after. I think we're going to have kind of like an explosion of really useful um, products, and I think that people are going to be more empowered. Part of going to market, it really comes down to building the right thing. Like, that job is going to be a lot harder if you're not building the right thing. And so, making sure that you're starting off with market research, enhanced with AI, and then also using AI to help you brainstorm your go-to-market strategy. I predict that product development and product developers in particular, or product managers, have the necessary tool set right now to build amazing things.
Love it.
So I think it's an exciting time.
Love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Tim, thanks so much for joining us today. This is incredibly insightful and really has hopefully as many people out there spinning and their wheels circling about interesting things they could do, and now they can like just get out there and start playing with it. So let me ask you, like, how could people find you? How can they help you? What are your lines online, and what are you up to, and how could people be a service to you out there?
Yeah, I think I wasn't actually prepared for this, but we could put it in the show notes. You could follow me on Twitter. I don't know the handle off the top of my head. LinkedIn, and I will plug my employer, TeamGantt. If you guys are looking for project management software, it's Gantt based, so it's really good for more complex type projects that have a lot of moving parts. Maybe like the Asanas and the Mondays just don't seem to scratch that itch. I'd say go check out TeamGantt. It's a great project management software. And yeah, I'm working on all sorts of things, on the side, and I'll be posting those things on LinkedIn and Twitter for really focused on, for product people, and just for tinkerers and AI tools. So
Love it. Love it. Awesome. Well, everybody, if you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, give it a 5-star review. If you don't want to give it a 5-star review, don't give it a review. And if you've got a guest or a topic suggestion, feel free to email me at research@360insights.com. Once again, everybody, thank you for tuning in, and we'll be back next week with another Go to Market Innovators. And until then, keep growing, everybody.